So, dear Ministers Brigitte Zypries and Michael Kurtika, sehr geehrter Generaldirektor Benjamin Bracke, to whom I'll give the floor in 1 minute. Cher Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, cher Philippe Huberdeau, plaisir de te retrouver dans cette belle assemblée. Chère Clara Chapaz, Director of the French Tech Mission, who doesn't need any introduction from anybody, and dear members of the French Tech and the French Tech Berlin in particular. Dear Clark Parsons, Managing Director of the Internet Economy Foundation. Chers entrepreneurs, dear entrepreneurs, and members of this vibrant French-German tech community. It's a great pleasure for my team and for me to welcome you all to the French Embassy on this obviously very special occasion as we are gathered here tonight to support Scale Up Europe and promote the European digital sovereignty, which is more than ever, should I say, one of France's top priorities. I've been ambassador from France to Berlin for a bit over 2 months now, after 20 years in North America, as French ambassador to Washington in particular. And this event with you, this dive into European entrepreneurship, means the world to me. I wanted you to know that. I'm very pleased that representatives of both private and public sectors, French and German, are with us here today to address together a topic with major stakes for Europe, how to foster European startups and scale-ups and build European tech champions. As you know, this priority of ours is followed with particular attention by President Macron, and I'm glad to convey to you this evening President Macron's strongest support as well as the strongest encouragements from Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire, with whom I talked a bit earlier today about this event. I would like to start by expressing my warm thanks to French Tech Berlin and its co-presidents Gunnar Graef and Marie-Avril Rostein-Kuhler in particular, for taking the lead in the organization of this superb and important event, with a special word of thanks, if I may, to the Embassy's Economic Department, its head Claire Thiriot-Kant and Luca Derville in particular, who've worked in close cooperation with French Tech Berlin. Yeah, thank you. I would also like to thank Madame Anna Christmann, Commissioner for Startups and Aerospace in the Ministry of Economy and Climate Action that you just saw and listened to, I believe, as well as Alain Godard, CEO of the European Investment Fund, who also gave us the honor to participate in one of the roundtable sessions. I know that you had a fruitful workshop session earlier this afternoon, and we very much look forward to hearing the results of your talks. Before giving you the floor, it's always dangerous when you ambassadors say, before giving you the floor, let me do this or that. Always, I will be brief, but I'd like to share 3 brief messages with you today. First of all, let me say a few words about the French-German relations and put things a little bit into perspective here after the bad noise that we've been hearing here and there. The fact of the matter is that in the disrupted strategic and economic environment that we are in, the French-German partnership is more important than ever to meet the considerable common challenges that lie ahead. These challenges include increasingly fierce competition between powers, which raises the quasi-existential question of the place and role of the European Union as a full-fledged player in the multipolar world, and the tech is a growing part of the equation. These challenges also include the need to reduce our dependence on China, which forces us collectively to rethink our value chains and to pursue a de-risking strategy in order to avoid a decoupling that would hurt Europe most. I could add many other challenges, and to start with the threat posed by global warming and the loss of biodiversity. And as we speak, as you know, there are many negotiations going on these two issues. Faced with a combination of challenges of this magnitude, everyone realizes that a Franco-German response in the service of Europe is the only possible rational way. Well, in this respect, I have good news today. The Franco-German engine has got back into motion and is running at full speed again. So keep in mind that the Franco-German motor, engine, whatever you name it, friendship, couple, I could add to the list, is running at full speed again. President Macron and Chancellor Scholz met in Paris on October the 26th for an intensive discussion in which I participated and which led to two main results. First, the two leaders reaffirmed the strong political will on both sides to face the many challenges I alluded to on the basis of a Franco-German policy with and for Europe. Furthermore, the President and the Chancellor decided to launch in-depth consultations between the two countries to promote a Franco-German convergence on the important issues at stake, among which energy and hydrogen in particular, defense and security, and the agreement on the combat aircraft system of the future is excellent news. It was announced in the last days, as you know, as well as the European response to the American IRA legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, among others. So this meeting between the President and the Chancellor was instrumental, I believe, even more so because it was followed by a multiplication of political contacts, including the visit by our Prime Minister, Elisabeth Borne, to Berlin 10 days ago, which only confirmed that the Franco-German engine is back on the right track and again running at full speed. So this is number one. Number two, looking ahead, I believe the prospects are also very favorable and have a lot to do with what you are doing. As you all know, particular attention is being paid to the preparation of the next Franco-German Council of Ministers and the 60th anniversary of the Élysée Treaty, both in January, which will give Germany and France further opportunities to promote new initiatives and set an ambitious Franco-German agenda for the years to come. Three priorities stand out in this agenda, to oversimplify a little bit here: reaching out to the youth of our two countries. We have to get a Franco-German message to the youth of the two countries, and it is a bit lacking as we speak. Number two, defining the values that make us who we are as French, Germans, and as Europeans. And number three, embracing the three technological revolutions that are underway and changing our lives: the revolution of energy and sustainable development, which is more and more, I would say, front and center in the current discussions that we have with our German friends. The revolution of life sciences and genetic, for which Germany and France are costaud, j'allais dire, solid, well established, investing a lot. And of course, the digital revolution with its extensions into big data, the cloud, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and quantum technology, to name just a few. We cannot be closer to the topics that you have chosen for the round tables: cloud technology, climate tech and energy, artificial intelligence, and quantum technology. So as you can see, what you are doing with Scale Up Europe is precisely at the crossroads of the priorities that I have just mentioned for the Franco-German partnership. It matches perfectly. That's number 2. Number 3, the other great news, I believe, is that you are moving at full speed too. 1 year ago, almost to the day, under your watch, some of you already gathered here at the embassy and drew up a diagnosis of the problems of both financing and human resources that startups and scale-ups frequently encounter to grow in Europe. These discussions played an important role in stressing these issues at both bilateral and European levels. Well, you've done so much since then. Today's conference shows how active and meaningful our French tech communities are in Berlin, Munich, and hopefully in Düsseldorf in 2023. These communities build strong ties between our two vibrant French and German tech ecosystems, and they develop concrete and innovative solutions to address the challenges of our societies. And it should come as no surprise that more than half of the 300 members of Scale Up Europe are either French or German. I think it says a lot about the booming entrepreneurship that our two respective countries are knowing. Some of these key entrepreneurial success stories, which started in France or in Germany and expanded across the Rhine as a first step in their European and international journey, are here with us today. Doctolib, Conto, Volocopter, WeFox, among many, many others. And we hope to see many more success stories of this kind in the near future. That's why we want to continue and even accelerate on this path, pursuing Scale Up initiative and making it a new deal for sovereignty, so to speak. And here again, the stars are well aligned. In February 2022, under the French presidency of the European Union, Bruno Le Maire and his German counterpart, Christian Lindner, along with other European countries and the European Investment Bank, announced the creation of a European Fund of Funds managed by the European Investment Fund. We are glad to see that this project will become operational at the beginning of 2023. Its aim is to increase the capacity of European venture capital funds to finance late-stage development of European startups and scale-ups. And you know much better than I do how crucial, how critical this is if we want to foster emerging European tech champions, which is itself a key component of the European sovereignty that we are looking for. So let me conclude on this positive note, and again, my warmest thanks to each and every one of you. Merci beaucoup. Merci. Maybe you can introduce yourself. Yes, absolutely.
Dear Mr. Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, tech community. My name is Ben Brake, and I was just asked to introduce myself. So I'm the Director General for Digital and Data Policy in the Ministry for Digital and Transport. And I always say, kind of a disclaimer, that I'm not entirely responsible for the digitization of mobility, but we are rather looking into digital pure and digital only. So we are responsible within the ministry to actually give you the right framework in which you can operate. I really like the headline of the event today, A New Deal for Sovereignty, because I think it is really time that we speak about sovereignty and about a new framing of sovereignty. I would like to highlight two aspects I think we should bear in mind when we talk about sovereignty. First of all, we all need to do our homework, especially political decision makers and those responsible in the different ministries. Mr. Ambassador, you already mentioned that we need to put into action a right framework for venture capital. I think when we look at other parts of the world, the conditions are a bit more, how to say, stimulating over there than they are in Europe. So we have a lot to do. Also, in terms of the digital single market, we should actually come to a conclusion, or how to say, to a finalization of the digital single market. Because what we utterly need is a huge market actually to scale. And this is also about scaling up, to scale business models and new innovative ideas also within the European market. When you look east and when you look west, the markets are bigger. They have also other advantages, and we need to catch up. But what we also need to do is kind of a nitty-gritty work when it comes to our homework. For example, we also should have a deep look into our procurement rules. Very often, innovative startups, also the IT companies, cannot participate in public tenders due to some formal requirements they simply do not fulfill. This is also a measure, or this could also be a good tool or a good mean actually to help innovative companies to actually scale with their business here in Europe. I would call this, by the way, offensive mechanisms. So we shall do everything to actually empower our economy to actually catch up to the West and also perhaps to the East in order actually to get our values onto track. This is one aspect. So we need to do our homework with offensive mechanisms. Another one is that against the gloomy background of international relations at the current state, we also need to think about sovereignty within strong partnerships. And these partnerships can only lie in the West, both like-minded but also geographically. First of all, I think when you look in the transatlantic region, we are making very good progress when it comes to questions of trade, when it comes to questions of data privacy. You all have noticed that there is a new privacy framework agreement in place. We all hope and look forward to get an adequacy decision by the European Commission in March or in April. That is a cornerstone or a markstone in transatlantic relations. Also, when you have looked into the results coming out of the Trade and Tech Council, when you look at the agreements, especially on standards, when you look at those common efforts or common approaches perhaps to AI, I think this is a good work actually also to counter a bit the narrative that on the other side of the Atlantic there's something like data capitalism without any regulation. The United States have some kind of same discussions around content moderation when it comes to huge platforms or when it comes to ensuring actually competitiveness in the digital age. Some states have even introduced data protection rules that are stronger than the debate actually currently going on the federal level, because the United States are also thinking or discussing introducing data privacy laws on the federal level. So the transatlantic region is geographically one where we also should think about partnerships when it comes to sovereignty. We should not underestimate the G7 as a place actually where we could also come forward when it comes to data-driven business. When you look, for example, into the plans of the G7 presidency of Japan, the upcoming one next year, they will put a very, very strong emphasis on the data free flow with trust issue. I know that many people say these are only warm words. The Japanese are very well aware of that at the moment there is the debate that these are only warm words. So they would really like to, how to say, as we say in German, put a bit more flesh to the bone in order to come to tangible results. And for example, data spaces could be these kind of tangible results. We also should bear in mind that in the OECD there are discussions going on digital and data sovereignty, and I say this also against the background of the visit our current Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock is paying to India at the moment. We shall not forget the Global South. We need to look at the dedicated countries of the Global South in order also to form some kind of coalition when it comes to the question of how we deal with data in the international sphere. So we have two pillars, I think, when we talk about New Deal of sovereignty. We need to do our own homework. We need to actually focus on offensive mechanisms, on offensive measures, actually to scale up our economy here in Europe. But we also need to actually join forces with like-minded countries, especially against the very, very difficult international background we are currently faced with. Let me also say a few words with regard to the Inflation Reduction Act in the US. This is actually, of course, not helping. We are doing two steps in the front, one to the back with this. So I very much support what the President of the European Commission just said, that we shall not with a hot heart actually react to this, but we should, because Europe is also the place where we are looking, where we focus on rights and on mechanisms. So what we should do is, if there is no, if we don't see a perspective within the negotiations with the US, we shall of course ask the WTO to look into this. What we also should do is we should perhaps look into our competition law, for example. I know that we have currently a lot of IPCIs ongoing, especially those in the cloud aspect, but also others. But we should perhaps look very generally if our competition law does not only, and this is unfortunately how we look into it, we look into competition law on the EU level if there are no, we don't want to have huge companies in Europe that might dominate the European competition. But is this the right perspective? It's just a question. Shouldn't we have a global perspective on this one? Shouldn't we allow European champions to grow in order to compete globally? That could also be a measure, by the way. So to just conclude, when we talk about a new deal of sovereignty, we need to do our own homework. We need to look into everything we could do actually to give the entrepreneurs the right way and the right means in a right framework to actually grow and scale. And we have to look into and we have to focus on international cooperation. Because, by the way, I assume that most of the entrepreneurs present here, your supply chains are not only in Europe and your markets are probably worldwide. So we need to find some common ground with like-minded countries actually of how we actually could deal with data-driven business. And as I said, the ongoing negotiations probably is not the right word, but the exchange on the Inflation Reduction Act should also remind us that actually we should become more competitiveness, but we should actually focus on the right ways to do this. I think the thoughts about actually going into letting the WTO have a look on this might be the right way forward. I wish you all a very pleasant evening here. I should say hi from the minister who should actually take over. Unfortunately, he's not available today, so you need to actually live with me. So thank you. And I put a disclaimer on everything I said because I'm under heavy painkillers. I just had a surgery with my tooth. So no, but joke aside, thank you very much for having me here. I wish you all a pleasant evening, great discussions, and please give us homework to do as political decision makers. Thank you very much.
Philippe.
Sure. Where do you want us to sit? I think I'm here, and where do you want to go? I'll go next to you.
Well, hello everybody. I am Marie Avril from the French Tech Berlin. And what is actually French Tech? You've heard this word several times. French Tech, it's a French government initiative originally, bringing together startups, investors and policymakers. There is a central institution represented today by Clara Chabas. Clara, thank you for being here. And we have also local, national, and international communities. We are here, the Berlin community. What are we? In the Berlin community, we are all volunteers, and we are all passionate and convinced Europeans. So we do not invoke the gods or grumble against China or America, but we want to help. We want to help with our networks and we with our ideas. So we have, because we're convinced that innovation, startups, scale-ups are really a key factor to European integration, to innovation, to employment, and to change. So we decided to gather this afternoon some great people. You were 60 people working really hard. It was really it was very, very impressive. Thanks to the support of the French Embassy. We'll drink your champagne after that. Thank you very much. The funds of French Tech. Thank you, and the great cooperation of the Internet Economy Foundation. Clark is here, and Philippe Bardot, the Scale Up Europe project. So what have we been doing? We had this high-level discussions. It was really very interesting, gathering entrepreneurs, investors. We had 15 funds represented, VCs and funds represented today, and institutions, institution represented. And we talked about these 4 strategic questions. We have now. There's the tabled captains of these 4 round tables who will present their conclusions and the suggestions. So you said that you wanted proposal. I think you're not going to be disappointed. I heard terrible things. Let me present all of us. We have Chris Bose from Arago, who will present the artificial intelligence roundtable results. You are the founder of Arago, who has, among others, created an AI-based assistance system which automatically processes control tasks. I hope I said it correctly. You're also member of the Digital Council by the German government. We have Iris Schwenk, who promoted in physics and who's founder and chief operating officer of at HQS Quantum Simulations. So you provide software for material scientists in the chemical industry. We have Clara Chabas. Clara's also our boss at the French Tech, and she will present the results of the energy and climate roundtable. Before being the director of the French Tech, you were former chief business officer of Vestiaire Collective, a French unicorn. You have worked in Asia, in North America, in London. So you have incredible experience in the whole structure, actually, of the companies, but also in the decision-making institutions. So it's very interesting. We have Clark Parson, our smart-haired who will present the cloud. You're a managing director of the Internet Economy Foundation. You're a consultant, founder, writer. What are you? I'm sure you are many other things. And then we have Philippe Bardot. Philippe Bardot is responsible for this great initiative, Scale Up Europe, and you came here to hear what we have to propose, what we want, what we would like to have, and to suggest and propose solutions. So I'm really eager and to hear what you are going to, this great solutions you are going to offer. After that, we have wrote our findings will be published and will be sent to our governments to boost Scale Up Europe. And I would, so we will present the result of these 4 round tables, but I would first like to give the floor to Clark Parson, who accepted to give us a little bit, a kind of a few, as a pre-review, a few results of they have made by the Internet Economy Foundation a great work on the cloud, on the question of the European cloud. So he accepted to present us tonight as an exclusivity. Thank you, Clark.
Really, thank you. I think we said amuse-gueule, right, for the cloud topic. There it is. Great. Do I have a clicker? Oh, thank you so much. That's great. First off, it's an honor to be here, and thanks to you, Marie Avril and Gunnar, for La French Tech Berlin, an amazing partnership, and thanks to your amazing team for what we've put together. Why am I here? I'm going to take us through about 10 slides because in a couple days we're releasing our second study on the cloud market, and perhaps it can inform our discussion about the cloud, but also we really see it as a key, and so we thought it might be a nice way to bring some topics in to what we'll discuss. First off, I have the unfair advantage of being a native speaker, so I really appreciate being given the forum. And I should say I feel a special kinship being in the French embassy. I was born in a French startup. The year 1702, a couple of brothers from France founded Mobile, Alabama. So I'm really honored to be here, finally coming back home, if you will. And Ambassador d'Atre, where I'm from, we would say Ambassador de Latry. So yes, welcome to Alabama. Yes. So what have we done? We've done. Let me click through. We've updated our cloud study because we wanted to look at what we think is a real key or hurdle for cloud take-up and digitalization in general in Germany and France. I'll get to that. We really see cloud take-up as really the key to digitalization. A quick look back. We did a study 4 years ago about the cloud market, and I think this slide is really helpful. This pyramid is very helpful because when we say cloud, it means a whole lot of different things to different people depending on what sector you're working in. And so I think just for orientation, even on our panel when we say cloud, it's really important that everybody understands the word cloud does not necessarily always mean the same thing. At the lowest level, if you will, is the infrastructure level, which if you see most of the providers, you know them as the American hyperscalers. That's a market that's quite dominated already. And one level higher, if you will, is the platform as a service market, where there's also European providers fighting for their place in the marketplace. And then, if you will, at the top, to help this pyramid just for orientation, we refer to software as a service, or all of the other sort of on-top services that are usually relying on infrastructure providers below them to help them deliver their services. But it's really helpful just for orientation because even in our discussion about cloud, we touched on all of the different aspects. Why do we talk about cloud? Because it's booming. Just here a note, it's really increasing by 1/3 per annum every year. This market is gigantic, and the hyperscalers are investing all tens of billions per year to keep up in the market. Nearly every 9th company sees it as the driver to digital transformation. Essentially, if you say, is your company going digital, you're talking about taking up cloud services. It's sort of become a euphemism for taking up cloud services. And it's an interesting thing to see how the German companies answer, why are they doing it? Why are they going? And the first answer is just to digitize the whole company. Then you get into processes and other things, but it's quite interesting to see how it cuts across all company lines and all company operations. Here's where it gets really interesting. We're really lagging. Germany is actually right around the European level for using cloud services. Interestingly and ironically, the French market, your companies are even further behind on adopting cloud services. We can maybe get into that later, but we have an answer from our study for why we think that's the case. The Lichtblick, the light at the end of the tunnel, is that the amount of SMEs using it is really growing. Of course, we had a pandemic that drove a lot of demand, but the gap is really huge. The big companies across Germany and France in general are taking up cloud services and have really jumped in with both feet. It's the SMEs, it's the KMUs that are really lagging. They're catching up, but they have a long way to go. And this is really critical for the German economy to digitize itself. Just a quick look at what are they using when we talk about the cloud services. It's also interesting, the most popular ones are a lot of what you might call public cloud services, like Dropbox or Google Mail, things that are not necessarily proprietary servers on your company's premises. But then there are also other elements of infrastructure, CRM software. It's an interesting mix, at least among the German companies. They're using a really broad swath of cloud services. I can speak even for our little foundation. I mean, we have probably 10 different cloud providers giving different little pieces of the service. Here's again where we're lagging, and we can talk about why, but we all look to the north, and once again, the Nordics are way ahead. Swedish SMEs are just almost more than double the number are using cloud. Perhaps has something to do with the fact that they've had dark fiber and broadband for a long time, so we can talk about infrastructure issues. But in general, France and Germany, our SMEs are way behind. We have a lot of work to do. Why are German SMEs not using the cloud? Guess what? You expected it, didn't you? Fear about my company's data, proprietary data. I'm afraid it's going to be lost. I don't want it leaving my premise. I'm really fearful. Interestingly enough, on the second spot, it's uncertainty about the legal situation, which we can also talk about, because the EU, I think, and Germany are trying to do a lot to help. But in general, the legalities, fears of compliance, and fears of loss of data are really driving this. So we have a lot of stories to tell. Also, the cloud providers about security. You know, you'll notice it's become the primary marketing argument for at least the European providers, is to say your data is safe in Europe. It's really the key selling point. So why would there be fear? Well, look at how the market is divided. I mean, you saw that chart earlier about the pyramid. 2/3 of the market for infrastructure and platform as a service is in the hands of 3 American hyperscalers. So this is where we are right now. This is the structural weakness we're up against that we can talk about also on the panel. But this is just simply, unfortunately, our European providers are clumped together and not even named. They're the next. So that's where we are right now. We're rest of world. We're just a rounding error, unfortunately, in the marketplace. So a couple thoughts on how to boost demand. We have Herr Brake, we have your answers here. At the German level, of course, promote the digitalization of SMEs. I think we're all trying to do that in a million different ways. Employees' digital skills is, of course, a key element. But here's another one. Public procurement, cloud usage in public, from public administrations. And finally, at the European cloudscape, we talked about a lot this, I'll report. The Data Act is really key because it's going to drive a lot of interoperability by forcing providers to be interoperable. We also need legal certainty with the new data agreement. European cloud infrastructure, we've talked about that a lot, Gaia-X. And of course, this will come up from our discussion as well, a European seal of data sovereignty. So not impossible things to do, but we have a lot of work to do. And thank you guys very much. Looking forward to a great discussion.
Thank you, Clark. Will you speak again about the result of your roundtables, or have you?
Summarize it.
All right, good. Okay. Thank you. Okay. I will begin with Iris. So Iris, you were the captain table at the quantum roundtable. When I came to see how the discussion was doing, I heard that you were suggesting, maybe not you, but your other people on the roundtable, suggesting to really invest more in quantum. And so in order to find funds, you suggested to cut the money of the Fraunhofer Research Institute in Germany. So I'm really curious to hear what your suggestions are.
Yeah, so this was not a suggestion in the end, but it was like a point of discussion. But I guess we agreed that we don't need to do that because there is enough money and we just have to use it right instead of cutting it from Fraunhofer. One very important point we had in our discussion was turning about like mindset, education, and expectation management. So quantum technologies are hard to understand for people who are not educated in physics or in this field. And this creates uncertainties and also makes it hard to understand what the possibilities are, but also what the problems are, and with that, what the timescales are on which we can expect results. On the investor side, this means, okay, there is a lot of capital, but there is also a lot of fear if you are not like an experienced deep tech investor to go into this field where you cannot expect big revenues after only a short time. There we discussed also a funny point. So we invest in building airports, and it also takes like years and years and years.
Especially in Berlin.
Especially in Berlin, exactly. But we are afraid of investing into this kind of unknown technologies that we don't understand, but that run on the same time scale as building an airport in Berlin, maybe. Yeah. So there's, I think, an important point in educating the respective stakeholders. Also, on the side of governments, expectation management is very important. So currently we have a big hype in the field of quantum technologies, but this may drop at some point, and we will come in some gap where we also still need money. So we don't only need money in this time where the hype is up, but also to bridge the gap until we really can bring the technologies to great values. And also in universities, some of the spin-offs in the quantum field and also in other deep tech fields experience still in some universities that it's hard to really get your spin-off running because you are in a lot of hard IP negotiations because universities are afraid to lose money, but instead IP is just lying around in their shelves and getting dusty, and just nothing is happening from it. So there I think mindset and education is very important. Also, we talked a lot about unified approaches within Europe and collaborations so that we really have like European companies that can act all over Europe, use the whole European market to get strong so that we really have European champions, because we will not get champions just from one of the European countries. So we need the whole intelligence and also the whole market to get strong. A very important point was also that there are not so many exit opportunities to European companies for quantum startups, which will lead to like a drop of venture capital at some point. So this was a big point in our discussion. And what was surprising for me, but it makes completely sense, is that also a lot of, especially hardware companies in the quantum field, have supply chain issues. On the one hand, with like basic technologies they need to use that are only coming from the US with certain regulations on it, or materials they need to use that come mostly from China. So if we don't tackle this supply chain issues, we cannot really grow in this field. And also, I think an important point on the field of talents is that on many levels we discuss we need talents in the quantum space that are really educated in quantum technologies. Yeah, we need more PhDs in physics or something like that. But that is not what the quantum startups see. They have more problems in getting talents from general software development or engineering that they need to really bring the technology to life.
Thank you. So we come back actually to the point. It's very interesting. We need a common communication about our common values, etc. Thank you very much, Iris. Clara, would you present the results of the roundtables about climate?
For sure. First, huge thanks to all the participants of the roundtable. I think it was very, very insightful to gather people from startups, from investment, from government. It was really, really cool to see all the exchanges we could have on the topic. The first thing I would highlight is, not to sound too catastrophic, but we all agreed that it's not a question whether we should try and aim to build sovereignty when it comes to climate, but we have to, because if we don't do it, basically we will have our industry disappear, and then we will have peace disappear, and then the world will go to an end. So that's kind of how the roundtable started, to give you a bit of insights on the discussion we had. So how do we do that? A lot of ideas were discussed. I think it came down to three things. First, regulation. Second, capital. And third, talent. So it's not going to sound too different from what you just said. Regulation in a way that there was also this idea that if we want to create big European scale-ups in this field. We can't stay in this mindset where people are just competing with one another from one country to the other. And we need regulation at European level to basically bring everyone forward on the same page and to help improve the standardization of all processes. So someone gave a very concrete example. Just the simple fact to calculate carbon emission varies from Germany to France. So if you're really trying to have an impact in this field, we need governments, and we need governments at the European Union level to really work closer together on defining what are those big standards we need to build together so we can have a chance to build European companies, and we don't put pressure on our companies to think through that every time they want to expand to one new market, they have to redo it all over again. Also regulation, because it was an interesting discussion between how sometimes Europe can have too much regulation and it can slow companies down. Some people mentioned GDPR. I won't comment because I'm now working for the States, so it's a bit of a weird position I'm in. But how we build those regulation, and in a way, it's great because this is also a reflection of how Europe wants to develop startups with values, but also sometimes can hinder the development and the speed of the development of startups. And we should rather use regulation to help speed things up. So we talked about some different fast-track initiatives that are existing in France. For example, when a company wants to open a factory, this was a big plan that was launched last year for industrial tech startups, hardware startups. How do we not only finance them, but help them open their factory, speed everything up when it comes to get the right authorization, so that it doesn't take 18 months to open a new plant, which is not really startup speed, but we can get things moving much faster. And I think there were other examples in Germany of this type of processes. So in a way, regulation we thought was a way to really accelerate the penetration of tech, and especially when it comes to climate, because we don't have time, we need regulators to help things move and take big bets. When it comes to capital, I think that was an interesting discussion on, again, better collaboration. How do we make sure, because there is a big funding gap, especially when it comes to hardware, and especially when it comes to fueling the startups that are not early stage anymore, but are not scale-ups yet. How do we make sure that we create the condition of success to fund those companies so that they're going to do the first prototype, they're going to open the first factories, they're going to really go to this stage where they can have a chance to become a scale-up. And here, because there are some very different ways state do this, for example, in France, there was one entrepreneur, not because I'm French, but one entrepreneur saying that the state helped a lot subsidizing this type of processes, but it's not necessarily the case in other European countries. So how do we better collaborate? So the fund of Scale Up Europe is a big one for scale-ups, but even before that, how do we better collaborate to create those conditions of success? Because we all agreed there are a lot of capital in Europe. We have, as I think it was one of the presentation earlier, we have the capacity to fund companies, but at the moment, private capital doesn't take the risk, and maybe comes back to regulation, to fuel those innovation, to take big bets that are going to take decades to really flourish. So the state also needs to come in with public funding and help incentivize private companies to also go into this field. And the last point on talent, it was interesting because we all agreed that we have the best talents in Europe when it comes to engineering, deep tech, obviously climate tech, which was a topic we discussed. Someone mentioned that we are the continent that spends the most on R&D when it comes to those topics. But we kind of suffer from the fact that you mentioned that at the moment there's still a struggle for tech transfer to happen from universities to private companies, to startups. So it's both cultural aspects, I guess. How do we make sure it's attractive for scientists to go and launch their companies and tackle those challenges? But also, probably coming back to regulation once again, how do we ensure that there is some kind of a common framework for universities when they are going to give their IP to entrepreneurs? What type of ownership should they give? What type of framework should we build? And how do we unify all of this at a European level? And the last point I would make on talent that I thought was also interesting is there's a need for scientists, engineers, in all those deep tech technologies to build companies, but there's also the need for all those scientists to go to the other side of the sector and go and join financing companies, because it's very hard, to the capital point, for private companies today to take those bets, because sometimes they just don't really understand the tech behind it. So how do we build also those bridges between science and investment, so that we can get more talents join investment funds? They can be private or public, both need them, and really help take those bets, being a little bit more reassured that they are the right bets.
Thank you. As you see, they have been very, very productive. Thank you. And coming back to regulation, your just to give you an example, it's really something very specific we were all living, experiencing today, is that we really need governments, we really need policymakers, we really need people taking decision and really supporting us, and because maybe they didn't spend 4 hours close with a notary, you know, when doing a closing in mergers and acquisitions in Germany. So it's something maybe we could change. Hein Christian, would love you. Do you have a micro? Oh, yeah. Thank you. About artificial intelligence.
Okay. I'm going to make this short and sweet and first talk about what we agreed upon, basically the facts, and then also some suggestions that we can work on. So number one, there was total agreement, and it's very similar to what you said, that we do have the best science here in Europe. We don't have a lack of things to do in artificial intelligence. Our question is more how to get that science to actually be commercially successful. The second thing that we all agreed upon was that there is a financing gap, not at the startup level and not at the super growth level, but at after Series A. So those tickets that are too small for the big mega funds and too big for the normal venture capitalist. Third thing that we all agreed upon was that we need to have a boost of mindset. We kind of said we need more of an American attitude towards marketing, or more of a be less afraid attitude towards when it's about trying things and actually rolling them out, which probably is the most difficult topic in the suggestions. Now I have two things that we agreed on that are contrary to what you read in the newspapers, but I've heard it twice now. Number one, we don't have a lack of talent. Like, which goes together with the science part, and which is what we've just heard. We do not have a lack of talent. Even though you read the war on talent and blah every time in the newspapers, but it's not the problem. We might have some challenges of properly rewarding the talents or incentivizing them, but governments are actually working on that. We should be more proud of the actual people that we have here and keep them here and motivate them. We also agreed that this talent was motivated by the quality of living in Europe, and especially in France and Germany. The second one that is contrary to what you read is that it's too early to regulate AI. We don't know what it is yet, right? There's two types of AI. One is about improving something that's already there, optimization, and the other one is the real game changer, when we automate, I don't know, 80% of work and stuff like that. So since we don't know what the AI is yet, it's very hard to regulate, and I think there was common agreement that regulation in this case would be pretty harmful, because we would deal with regulation more than we would deal with actually implementing it. And implementing AI is the biggest problem that we have in Europe. So now to a few suggestions that we had in there. Is number one, we have to recognize that a lot of what we see in Silicon Valley has been pre-financed for a long time. I mean, you've also been saying this, there's a big scope, right? It took Google 12 years before they ever even started thinking about a business model. This would not happen in Europe, even though that's completely wrong. So also we have to see that a lot of this funding has been public funding in the US. And the differentiation here is that it's not just financing, but it's also procurement. And Mr. Ambassador, you've said this before, is the ability of governments to buy from startups or give startup that immense security, saying like, we're going to buy your stuff for 10 years, like it was done in the US. Right? That is a very important thing. It's not just about creating public finance funds. It's also about creating the ability to buy from startups and make sure that it doesn't cost the startup an arm and a leg to actually participate in a tender. Because which startup can afford to have a 2-year sales process, right? So no one. The next suggestion that we had is if you want to do regulation, use regulation to incentivize the tech ecosystem itself to use AI for improvement, or to incentivize companies that have to deal with basic problems like social welfare or like climate change to actually start using modern technology. That might be a difficult situation for legislation, like how can you rule that someone needs to use some technology, but in the banking area, for example, this has been done, so it should quite be possible on this. Another suggestion that we have is allow ecosystems to develop around dominant technologies. Like, we're so afraid in Europe to create a technology that has a serious market power, like Apple has with iOS. But then there is a fantastic ecosystem built around iOS. Why can't this happen in AIs and so on in Europe? We are so afraid of creating a powerful player that we simply don't have any of those. Another point that was made, and I'm going to close with that, is we don't really have a problem in artificial intelligence with GDPR, even though that is publicly discussed very differently. No one at the table has complained about, we don't have data, we can't do anything. Actually, quite to the contrary, we had the message that, look, all these algorithms, deep learning and so on, they've already been taken by US companies. Let's move to the next level of algorithms, and also ask the question of how can we work with little data or no data?
Thank you very much. Clark, you still want to speak?
Yeah, hard acts to follow. Hello. Thank you. You guys have already heard me, so I'll try to be brief. But I do want to do justice to what was a really amazing and very lively discussion from our table. We dealt with two things together, if you will, cloud and digital sovereignty, and they sort of melted into one. A lot of the points you guys have made were echoed at our table too. 5 quick points, I guess, to summarize what was discussed at our table. The first one was, it was quite surprising, urgency. It was really interesting, our table, there was just this general tone of incredible, earnest concern and urgency about solving this issue. I mean, some of the quotes were quite extraordinary. I mean, first of all, several people noted Emmanuel Macron, President Macron's notion of if we lose digital sovereignty, we lose political sovereignty. So it sort of really felt life and death at our table talking about this issue. We had quotes like, we're on borrowed time. This is happening now. It's going to be too late soon. We're naive was a very common theme running throughout the table. So there was a bit of, it wasn't resignation, but there was just a real sort of existential angst going around the table about how can we solve this problem. We had an interesting mix at the table of startups and scale-ups. We had some from the ecosystem like Delivery Hero and Ecosia, and others from the Berlin ecosystem. We had some cloud providers too at the table, also some VCs, and also some policy regulators, people from the ministries. So it was quite a mix. 4, I guess, points, further points about what we had. The definition of sovereignty was an interesting discussion. We actually went a little deeper, just to say, well, let's talk about sovereignty. We actually went German meta and said, what is sovereignty? Which I think was really helpful, because it actually split off into this notion of, let's not just talk about the means of production, like chips and hardware, and let's be in control of our own supply chains, but also actually about IP and design. That was actually a really interesting theme about we need to, when we talk about sovereignty, we need to actually even go further back up the value chain and make sure that our companies are in command and control of the IP and the design that they're creating. The third thought from the table was actually the dominant thing that I would leave you with, which is huge discussion, and almost everybody said the recipe is a Buy European Act. It was really interesting. I mean, it was a very common theme. Almost most of the speakers said and most of them were French, honestly, we really need a Buy European Act. This has to happen now. We have to prescribe that that companies buy cloud services from European providers. Then that split off into a lot of details. How do you do that? So we talked about there was actually disagreement at the table. Also, some of the German voices wanted to be a little more pragmatic and said, maybe we don't need to do that. Maybe let's first find common ground on certification. Maybe we can find sort of a backdoor way to say Buy European. Like, you can buy anything you want as long as it's certified to European standards. Sort of a nice way to say Buy European, which is an interesting compromise, perhaps, for the German-French position. There was a lot of discussion, Chris, you just mentioned it, about requests for proposals, public procurement. A really big issue about a key way to sovereignty is to get the state and the communities looking to our own startups and scale-ups to source and to become their customers. We had a lot of discussion, interesting, from the sales side of selling cloud services. We had the notion that CTOs usually it's safer to choose the US company. You know, we have the old American phrase, no one ever got fired for hiring IBM. By the same token, right now, if you're a CTO, you're not going to get fired for going with Google or Azure or Microsoft, or Amazon, unfortunately. And that's a big mindset change to sort of take a risk and buy from the European one. So, and finally, there was a notion also on Buy European. Along the theme of naivete, we have to really fight for our startups. It was noted that all of the hyperscalers give our startups 100,000, usually in free cloud services. So imagine the dependencies you're creating if all of your startups are instantly dependent on the US hyperscalers from the very beginning for their data center and for their back office. It's really hard to then tell a scale-up or a startup after 2 or 3 years, okay, now you need to switch to European. So this whole notion, it was really, we need to somehow start a campaign to replace these hyperscalers with this offer, because it was compared to drug dealership. The first one is free. So the Buy European, that really was sort of the Holy Ghost above our whole panel. That was really the topic that went everywhere. 2 other final points that were made that I think were also key. The Data Act and interoperability as a key piece was brought up a lot, as well as these data dependencies even in apps. I mean, even if you're buying a software as a service product that's hosted in the US, you can end up with your own company design or other proprietary information locked on a provider, and it's really hard to get it out. And finally, Michael Brame, thank you for the thoughts at the beginning, because all roads lead back to funding. You guys have all talked about it. Funding was really seen as a key. We talked a lot about how can we get more capital in Europe and liquidity in the capital markets. So it's great that we have the European Investment Fund here, and that this topic is front and center, because even on cloud and sovereignty, once again, we found ourselves saying we've got to pool European private capital. We've got to get more of our own capital into our innovation ecosystem. That's going to be the key to becoming sovereign.
Well, thank you very much. It's really very interesting. Thank you to all of you. I would be very happy to hear now Philippe Berdo, because you are supposed now to find the solutions. And so you have brought a few presents to suggest to solve all the problems which were underlined. But I have first a small present for you. Yesterday evening, when I was thinking about today, I said, "Oh, I'm going to play," and I went to OpenAI. On the playground of OpenAI, and I entered, how can we build the European tech champions of tomorrow? And I got that. I mean, 6 proposals, very impressive. We are all there. I mean, it's really great. Invest in research, foster entrepreneurship, encourage collaboration between university, industry, and startups, etc. Promote STEM education, invest in training and development, and create a supportive regulatory environment. This is for you.
Thank you.
I didn't do it.
That's great. That shows the potential of AI. And I can't wait to get the answers with a quantum computer. Yes, some of the solutions were already mentioned this evening. We had the chance to have Alain Godard to explain us where he stands on the fund of fund, and so I think this will really be a game changer, and it's just around the corner. Basically, it will come into force beginning of next year. Of course, we have to look beyond that. There were lots of talks in the round tables about the difficulty also to fund deep tech, because of course the horizon to rentability is much longer in deep tech. And so one of the solutions we helped to bring about within Scale Up Europe was by giving a mandate and an ambitious budget to the European Innovation Council, which is funding at the early stages of deep tech startups. Unfortunately, it cannot go too far because it has a cap on the funding it can provide to one startup, which is 15 million euros, which is still some money. But when you talk about very capital intensive technologies like quantum, it's not that much. So we have to look beyond that, and there are talks also, as you might know, at the European level to try to finalize the capital market union, to have because one thing is to have the right mindset for VCs to invest in some technologies. The other thing is that they have to have a good prospect of exiting. And for that, you need also a very liquid, large capital markets. And so we have also to push on this side. And so for instance, one of the ideas is to facilitate the double listing of companies in different markets, because we still have different markets within the European Union. Another idea also is to alleviate the burden on large asset managers or institutional investors on investing in equity. For instance, there is still a very heavy burden on insurance companies and pension funds that wants to invest in equity. So this is something the European Commission has on its program and its roadmap, on which could help further the financing of the company. So just to name a few prospect ideas.
Thank you. So it's true, before the roundtables we had Alain Godard, who's now leading the European investment fund. Yeah, sorry. Can you explain us how it is going to work actually? How all the investors who are here can work with this investment fund? How all the entrepreneurs who are here can get money from this investment fund, and when? Thank you.
Okay, so the idea is it's a fund of fund, so it will not invest directly into companies. It will invest in venture capital funds, who in turn will invest in the companies. And so the idea is that it will invest in these investment funds, VC funds, that focus on late-stage financing. So that will help our startups become scale-ups and to become global champions. And so the objective is to help build something like 10, 15 very large VC funds in the magnitude of 1 billion euros or more, and these very large VC funds will then operate on a very private, free basis, market-based basis, and do their own decisions to invest in startups and scale-ups across Europe.
So it means that you won't profit from it, Iris, because. So what is the kind of financing we can offer you? You could find so.
So I guess like this money is in turn available to us, yeah. So if we have in the end this venture capital funds for later stages, yeah, this is definitely something we need here in Europe to not go to the US to ask for more money. So I guess that is really a good way. And also what we see in quantum technologies, what also was mentioned by the other panelists is that if the governments directly spend money to buy products from our companies, this is way better than VC funding. So this is a very important point to bring money into the field.
You're really lucky. This week where you have a Nobel Prize. Alain Aspect is going to become the Nobel Prize for quantum. So you are now very famous. Everybody speaks about you, etc. You said before, let's hope that it will stay like that. What is your business model actually? Are you already able to work and to sell something, or is your process extremely long?
So we as a software company are somehow dependent on other people on our roundtable building the hardware. so our really quantum computing based business model is depending on the hardware providers. But like in selling to some kind of research centers and stuff, we still can already sell our products. But we also, since we are providing software to solve material science problems, we also can offer solutions already on conventional hardware. That helps to break down a problem to the really important part that really needs quantum technologies. With that, we can already offer products today to our customers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It was very interesting because you say we need time, and all the others said we're in emergency. So there's really a kind of opposition between all of you, and we also spoke about regulation and the fact that in Europe, of course, it's a fantastic market. We have different regulations. I have a question to you, Hans Christian, concerning. Is it really, in your experience, is it really difficult to work in other countries? And could you think about settling in France, for example, or and working in other instead of settling to the USA, or saying, okay, it's possible, or it's too complicated, or I have to call Clara Chapaz and she will help me.
Well, it is complicated, and it was a topic of discussion on our table. Market size, basically. If you're in the US, you have the entire US as a market. If you are in Germany, you start with Germany as a market, and then you go to France, which is a completely different market. Not just because of different regulations. Actually, the regulations are more harmonized in Europe than they are, but the behavior of clients is totally different. And across the behavior of clients in the US is much easier. You will find a lot of companies, and we also had this at our table, you will also find a lot of companies that are European and their main customer base is in the US. Because it's easier to sell to these guys. And it's also, they are more willing to take the leap and make the bet.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I see that we're running out of time, but I would like Clara. I think Clara, you spoke enough. Huh? It's okay. Clara, I would love to ask you a question. We were talking about talent, etc., etc. And there's also, I think, you support in French Tech, etc., which is diversity and immigration, etc., etc. So, in the tech branch and in the startup branch, it's really a catastrophe. We are really there are not enough founders. Thank you, Iris, for being here. I'm sure you're invited so often. Thank you for being here. Where there's like an investors, and I would say, according to the numbers I could see, it's even worse. I know it's really bad in France, but it's even worse in Germany. So what is the position? Is this something you're working on? What can we do?
I mean, it's. Is it still working? Yeah. The numbers are what they are, so they are really not great when it comes to diversity in the tech sector all around the world. But to take France as an example, which obviously I know better, there was a study last week just to take gender diversity, that was released that showed that 1 company out of 4 in the top 120 startups in France, which is called the French Tech 120, has 0 women in their leadership team. To me, it's not only a question of what is right to do or what like social opportunities, equal opportunities, gender empowerment and all of that, but it's also very disturbing because when you think that those companies are building the solutions of the world of tomorrow, and people would decide on how and what type of technologies we're building, 1 company out of 4 only has women on their leadership team, and one company out of 4 only then brings this type of gender diversity when building those solutions. This is quite catastrophic. I mean, from just a commercial angle, because we're half of the population, but also from a performance angle, because I think no one now challenges the fact that diversity means performance. So this is definitely something that we are very focused on. How do we change and accelerate on this topic? And I talked about women, but I can say the same for basically every type of diversity statistics. I think it's 80% of our founders have had 5+ years of postgraduate studies. Most of them come from Paris because we're a very centralized country. Actually, 80% of the funding also stays in Paris. So all of those combined together means that it's a bit crazy because we are in an ecosystem that creates jobs massively, creates innovation, brings the society forward, but at the same time kind of reproduces the same mistakes that the former economic companies did. So yeah, we're very focused on this, and I think we said earlier, like, we don't necessarily have a problem of talent in Europe because we have amazing talents, but I still do think we have a problem of talent because too many of our talents look exactly the same, and this is not going to help us create successful companies.
But what do you do? What can we do? Regulation?
Yeah, I think the problem, I'll take gender diversity because this is a topic I know the best, but gender diversity, the problem comes from all type of reasons. So from orientation, and this is something our president has been talking about during his last campaign in June. In May, sorry. How do we bring more young girls towards scientific studies? How do we, and so one of the ideas that was discussed back then is from the age of 12, we need to really make it very concrete. What are the jobs you can get when you do scientific studies? What is it to be an engineer? What is it to be a scientist? Really showing that these are good opportunities, and these are opportunities that anyone can take and girls can go for, because this is one of our biggest issue. You only have 10% women in the engineering schools, especially coding schools. So obviously you have the problem in all the different aspect of the economic development after that. Some of the things we're working on that are a little bit more short term, we're working with French Tech 120 companies. We released what we call the Parity Pact last year, just basically putting companies together and thinking what can we do at all the steps of the journey to onboard more women, make them succeed in the company, make them flourish, teach them how to develop in the companies, and then also make sure that we can create opportunities for everyone in those startups. Because everyone agreed that we all think because we're in tech, we know about diversity, we're very aware about those issues, but unless you really take very concrete measures, you end up in the same place as any other company. So to give you a very concrete example, some of the commitments that the companies did were to make sure that, it sounds stupid, but to make sure that, as on this panel, there's always as many people in each startup that is trained to represent the company internally and externally. Because if we want to inspire women to go into those positions and those companies, they need to feel welcome and represented. Very simple stuff like making sure that the hiring process is inclusive. There was a study in France made by an association that showed that more than half of the job offers are not inclusive. It's like, oh, I'm looking for a woman assistant, or I'm looking for a man engineer, which in France is un or une. I think you have the same in German. So it's small things, but if you don't pay attention to those things, you end up with the situation we're in.
And try also to give the money to the one who are okay. I have a few other questions, but it's already time. Maybe you want to conclude, or I ask a last question as you. Well, I will ask my last question. So it's just a little bit tricky question, actually. It's more a kind of general. Why do we always say that national funding is so important? Why do we always say that it's so important to get European money? Because there is so much money. We are anyway in a globalized country. And we see, Data IQ, which is a French company, which is now at the Nasdaq, but it's totally French. We see BioNTech, which is a great German company, which is also at the Nasdaq, but it doesn't change anyway. BioNTech is in Mainz. Mayence gets all the money of the taxes. We say that now that the trottoirs are in gold because they have so many money. So is it really a problem to have money from the USA, from Chinese, from the Qatar? I think BMW has 20% belonging to the Qatar.
You're looking at me, so
I'm sorry.
well, the money has no odor, as the saying goes. No, I think it's a strategic question, and it was also one of the ideas at the very start of the Scale Up Europe initiative, is that the problem, if you are only or predominantly funded by extra-European investors, well, you have, I think, three problems with that. The first problem is that it means that all the value you create in Europe, with all the talents that we have in Europe, and the brilliant founders and so on, well, all this value created then goes into US pension funds, for instance, and profits to pensioners in California or elsewhere, which is not very good from an economic point of view and social point of view for Europe. The second issue with that is that not always, but quite often, once you have predominantly extra-European investors in your capital, then they will, of course, also orientate the course of your development or your scaling up. They will orientate it in terms of sectors, in terms of choices of values. Perhaps they would pay less attention to diversity. Perhaps they will ask you to relocate your headquarters at some point in the US. And so it might also deviate the course of the company, and it might pose also some sovereignty problems at some point if you have to relocate elsewhere in the world. And the third issue also is that if you rely only on foreign money for your development, then it makes you very fragile to a reverse of a tendency in the financing decisions made by these investors. And we already begin to see that with the fact that many US investors that were very present 2 years ago now are going away from Europe for various reasons. But so it's better to be able to rely on domestic money.
Thank you.
I would just add, Philippe Hubert already made one of my 3 points, which is the pension funds. Why let the upside go to California teachers' pension and Ohio police officers' pension when our pension funds are producing really terrible returns? So socially, the upside should be going to our foundations and pensioners. I mean, that's why we're really working to fund the pensions of Americans. It is kind of crazy. The second point is the brain drain is real. There was a study from Akatech out of Munich. A founder who ultimately does an IP in New York or goes to New York for their funding is much more likely to found their next company in the US. So literally following the money is literally an entrepreneur brain drain. It's just a one-way street. So it sounds fine, hey, let them go to New York and do an IPO, but actually then their next company will be in the US. So we're literally losing our greatest talents for entrepreneurship if we force them to go do their IPOs or their capital liquidity events over there. And the final thing you mentioned is control. Klaus Hummels from our board once did the math. The top 30 internet companies in the world, Europe has 1.8% of the capital and 1.4% of the board seats. So who's in charge, deciding where the Standorte are, what the terms are, all the control issues, if they're in the hands of Asians and Americans, it's kein Wunder that the state of Niedersachsen wants that giant percent in Volkswagen still, and that the German government wants that giant percent in Deutsche Telekom still, to have exercise some form of control. Because if you're in the board and you own it, then you decide where the main control issues. So it's a huge issue back to sovereignty. If you don't own the companies, then you have no say in how they're run.
In the end, you have to add, if you take this one step further, right? We're also talking about geopolitics. In the end, if you have American investors, even though we're all the Western Bloc, American and European interests are not always aligned. Definitely, European and Asian interests are not aligned. In the end, the legislation then can be built around this. Can greatly influence dependency of companies if they get caught in the middle.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have still a few minutes. Does anybody have some question? I have a question here in the public. Luca, here. But we're going to meet afterwards, so we'll still have time to talk together.
I would like to make it very short because the cocktail is waiting for us. I would say, my name is Günther Tau from the company TBS. We are since more than 15 years in the area, as consultant in the area of AI and bioeconomy. That's for the background. First question to Clark. He mentioned in the beginning, was giving us some files regarding clouds. But I was missing Gaia. Is Gaia already a lame duck? Second question, you were mentioning the problem of the SMEs in Germany, that they're not less digitalized. 40% of the GDP in Germany comes from the SMEs. So why in your round is not an SME? I know in Berlin you have difficulty to find them, but go just to Baden-Württemberg or even Bayern, you find more of them. That's the question.
Thank you for Thank you for your question. I'll answer the second one first. I think actually at our round table, we had a lot of SMEs at the table. I just drew the short straw to represent our wonderful cloud table here on the panel. So we actually had several Mittelstand at our table. So their voices were heard actually at our roundtable discussion. The first question about Gaia X. This came up today in another discussion. I think a general consensus is that the dream of the European cloud sort of kind of died once all the American hyperscalers started saying, can I come in, can I come in, can I play? And suddenly we had this crazy situation where Gaia X, to achieve its goals, was going to have to rely on AWS and other hyperscalers to be hosted. So the dream of a federated European cloud with maybe open source standards and a way to have a federated European ecosystem and architecture is still alive, and Gaia X, I think, in that regard, is still living on in the halls of our ministries and hotly discussed. But I've been in those working groups, and it's really difficult when it's a global market and you've got NVIDIA providing all the AI chips, and I mean you have all of these players that deserve a seat at the table because they're supplying key infrastructure, but suddenly you find you've been sort of unterwandert, as our German friends would say, from the American companies and the hyperscalers. So if the idea was to create the pro-European sort of let's go Europe sort of chauvinistic thing, that has unfortunately been completely now lost and watered down. It was a great idea and still is a great idea, but the execution, something got lost along the way. That was my 2 cents. Chris, others could disagree, but it seems like that was kind of the main problem, is it ran head first into reality.
Thank you, Clark. Clara, do you want to conclude? Because we have to now.
Sure. I first start to say a warm thank you to Mr. Ambassador for having us here today. I think it's a very symbolic event for us at Mission French Tech because we're first in Germany. And France and Germany have a lot in common when it comes to startups. I would say first, the ultimate belief that tech and entrepreneurs, so a lot of you in this room, no pressure, have a big role to play when it comes to unlock technologies for all the challenges we discussed today, and unlock innovative solutions to AI, to cloud, to climate change, all those big challenges that we're collectively going to face. I think the second thing we have in common is a really great will to collaborate on those issues. The ambassador said it earlier, much better than I would, but France and Germany have been partners for very long, and they are partners when it comes to tech. Interestingly, when you talk to the top 120 startups in France, before COVID, most of them would tell you their number one priority market when it comes to international expansion is the US. But nowadays, it's Germany. So all of the French startups are really looking at ways to increase collaboration. A third of them have an office in Germany already. A few of them have made acquisition. German companies have also acquired some of the French companies. And I think this is just the beginning of a very strong relationship that will help both ecosystems mature. And the third one is, and coming back to the word urgency, I think the urgency to work together to really create this leadership when it comes to building a European sovereignty on all those issues. And we're uniquely positioned to do that because both ecosystems have been doing a great lot to really make startups flourish. But now we need to go beyond the competition and we need to move things to European level to really make things count. So I'm very excited about this. And I'll conclude by saying a huge thank you to Gunnar and Maria Avril and all the team. It's such a great example of what we strongly believe in, that all those French tech communities can bring people together, make us reflect, just bring the thoughts a little bit more forward, and increase collaboration. And so this is probably the best example I've seen of the work French tech communities do around there. So huge congratulations.
Thank you. ladies all. And thank you to all the 60 who were there and who worked and lent us your brain and your good ideas. Let's have a glass of champagne.